Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning from other people in different time zone. But this is Ellie Ricotta from the Philippines. It's 3 o'clock and 3:30 in the afternoon here in the Philippines. Thank you for having me. I'm going to talk about our experience, some developments in our PPP program, and the PPP Center here in the Philippines. If I can share my slide right now.
Sure, please go ahead.
There it is. I hope everyone can see that. As I said,
Yeah,
this
we can see it.
Thank you. There. I'm Eli Ricotta from the Philippines. My full name is Eliazar. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Philippine PPP Center. I've been here for the last three administrations, so it's a one of the longest officers here. So I said that because it's important as well to have institutional memory from people who will be managing your PPP program, and this is important as leadership transitions happen, and program such as PPPs would need continuity and stability, and having to withstand transition and leadership changes. The PPP Center in the Philippines was established as early as the early 90s. It has been renamed and reconfigured, reorganized, but still the same official agency mandated with the lead monitoring, coordinating, project development, capacity building agency for all of PPP requirements as far as national and local government. So we are a national government agency doing all of this support to both national and local agencies doing PPPs. We are an agency attached to our structure is that we're an independent office. We're attached to the National Economic and Development Authority, or the Ministry of Planning. It's your counterpart agency. Okay, let me start with this one. The Philippine Development Plan, our PPP program is anchored in the bigger development agenda of the Philippines. We have this ambition natin 2040. It's a long-term vision of what we want to achieve for the country up until 2040. But during the term of every president, they come up with a 6-year medium-term Philippine Development Plan. The current MTPDP is anchored on the following elements: peace and security, and I highlight the point about accelerating strategic infrastructure development. That basically is saying infrastructure development is a bedrock strategy of this long-term agenda of the Philippine government, and of course the 6-year plans and programs of sitting presidents. And that is side by side, equally important, with looking at equally important resilience, ecological integrity, and healthy environment as bedrock strategies as well. And all of that, particularly infrastructure development, looks at the role of the private sector as partner in development. The Philippine Constitution actually specifically mentions the role of the private sector in development, and that is through our PPP framework. Very busy slide here, but basically this is just our framing of how infrastructure development, economic recovery, and resiliency can really get together in the spirit of our options that include PPP. So from investments in key infrastructure requirements, transportation, food security, and stimulus to investment and creation, technological innovations, etc., all incorporating resiliency measures and requirements, of course, pursued through three main implementation and financing options. Of course, usually through our government appropriations, but that can be very limited. Also, some borrowings or official development assistance. But an important chunk of this implementation and financing option is public-private partnership. As I said, the Philippines, if I am not mistaken, is the first to have formalized a PPP, a BOT law, a PPP program in the Southeast Asian region, so that it has been incorporated officially even into our development agenda and our financing options, PPP, private sector finance, and implementation inputs being a major resource as well. And over the years, as I said, we have incorporated as well even this resiliency measures, responding to climate change, disaster risk and reduction, and of course, in compliance with our SDG commitments as well. What are the PPPs in the Philippines? Well, we don't have a PPP law that really has an encompassing coverage of what PPPs are, but we look at two main types of PPPs in the Philippines: the BOT, or Build Operate Transfer type. As I said, we have the Build Operate Transfer law, the first, as I said, to have been officially enacted as a Republic Act in the region. It still is our main legal framework. It's very flexible. It provides for different BOT options, from the very simple build, operate, transfer to other modalities such as build transfer, build lease transfer, BOO, etc. And there is even a catch-all provision there that says other contractual arrangements that may be acceptable, that may be approved by the president. Really recognizing the creativity of the private sector and the need for both parties to structure a project and say, and then look at how best to deliver it as a partnership following BOT type or mechanisms. The other one is, of course, joint venture, something our government corporations, local government units can do. An undertaking between public and private sector can be corporate JV or a contractual JV. Very simple investment type of collaboration with the public and private sector. So these two main PPP contractual agreements in the Philippines. There's of course an effort to put together a PPP law in the Philippines, and it's something we have been pushing for the last two Congress. That is amending the BOT law into a more comprehensive PPP law, incorporating both the BOTs and joint ventures and or combinations of them, because there are projects where we've unbundled them, and there are combination of modalities in various unbundled components. Next, some illustration of the modalities and structures. We look at either full PPP, where private sector does design, construction, O&M, operation and maintenance, or it can be unbundled structures, as I mentioned earlier, where both public and private sector can do respective tasks. Look at this one, or call them hybrid or blended financing, at least based on our BOT law and JV guidelines. So can be operation and maintenance, operation only, or both, or all of them for the private sector. All dependent on the structuring work that we do and as to which part of the component can best be done with the private sector. Just a quick illustration of what legal framework should be undertaken or be invoked by the concerned implementing or the contracting entity. In the Philippines, our institutions who can do PPPs have different legal framework or authority that provide them the mandate to enter into PPPs. For example, national government agencies can do BOTs under Republic Act 7718, but they cannot do JVs because there should be government corporations or public enterprises doing JVs, joint ventures. Local governments, however, can do both BOTs and enact their own local PPP code and invoke the corporate character of local governments, and therefore proceed to do joint ventures. Both our BOT and JV framework provide for solicited and unsolicited tracks, meaning one can be initiated by government. Through the solicited track, we do the feasibility study. It's part of our priority agenda. The other is unsolicited, something initiated or offered by the private sector. Really recognizing that government doesn't have the monopoly of creativity and ideas. Private sector can put together something, present a new technology, and then submit its unsolicited proposal. Of course, as a public sector project, the same will have to go through a competitive procurement process we call the Swiss Challenge, or the invitation for comparative proposal. So all provided for in our legal framework, both for the BOT law and the JV guidelines. In the Philippines, we also have a PPP Governing Board, so we don't have to go to Congress every time we need to amend or refine a legal framework. And as we do PPPs, we learn things that we can improve on. We learn from best practice from abroad, and then we try to customize them and incorporate them into the Philippines. We have a PPP Governing Board. It's a cabinet-level committee composed of the secretaries or ministers of finance, budget and management, economic and development authority, trade and industry, even Department of Justice is there. They put together or issue policy circulars to provide more detail, more guidelines, more of process, policy and process refinements as we go along. So over the years, we have developed already policy circulars on PPP public consultation and engagement, pipeline development, best practices, monitoring protocols, termination payments, probity advisors, assessing value for money, managing affected employees. The more recent one is relevant to our discussion. We put together a policy circular on safeguards that includes environmental, displacement, social, and even gender considerations, how they can be captured and managed in PPP projects at development, at contracting stages. It's a work in progress, as I say, as we go on and realize there are improvements we can do along the way. Other recent developments, as you must have read this in early of this year, we have Congress enacted or amended the Public Services Act. This is to allow more foreign equity into our infrastructure projects, particularly defining which are public utilities, and therefore foreign equity restrictions being more relaxed. This provides for more involvement of the private sector, particularly in PPPs, in defining, structuring project and taking on some of the risk as well, and that includes even climate and resiliency related considerations and requirements. We've also recently amended the implementing rules and regulations for our BOT law. We wanted, of course, amend the BOT law and have a more comprehensive PPP law, but that will take congressional work. But in the meantime, what we can do at the executive branch is to amend implementing rules and regulations. And this is also very recent, just a few months ago. But the relevant amendments to climate considerations, we've clarified that climate change adaptation and mitigation and disaster risk reduction type of projects can be done as PPP. So it's really expanding what we consider as infrastructure and development projects. So aside from just service delivery, can also be climate change adaptation and mitigation, risk disaster reduction type of projects. They can also be undertaken as PPP. As I mentioned, we have an unsolicited proposal provision, which allows for private sector submitting an idea, invoking a new technology or a new concept. We've provided some more detailed definition to what is new concept, and that is precisely reflective of this consideration for disaster and resiliency. We've defined new concept or technology as green, smart, emerging, or state-of-the-art concept or technology that could, among others, reduce negative environmental impact of the project. So very focused reference to climate-related considerations for a project to be viable or acceptable as an unsolicited proposal. Provided that in the evaluation of projects, approving bodies will be guided by and implementing agencies mitigating environmental impacts plans. So that, in other words, requires government agencies to have environmental mitigating plans, and whether the project cost is sufficient to meet environmental standards. So concretizing environment-related or climate-related considerations to the way we review, develop, evaluate BOT projects under these guidelines. Another development, as you know, the Philippines has a devolution structure. Our local governments, province, cities, and municipalities are devolved and independent. There was a ruling early last year, that they should be given higher share in the national taxes. That was followed up by an executive order formalizing a full devolution framework where most of national government's tasks cannot be delegated to them, and therefore the need to strengthen planning, investment programming, and budget linkage and monitoring systems for these local governments. This include incorporating into this now devolved tasks to them more detailed planning, programming, and of course aligning of land use plans and other environmental considerations reflective of regional requirements, priorities, considerations. And the same executive order also outlined that in these projects they would have to put together, there should be PPPs in them. So annual investment program of these local government units to be funded through local funds, borrowings, and public-private partnership. So there's that reference to the role of the private sector as well, even in this fully devolved, fully downloaded functions to them, with this given the bigger share of national tax to them. To major development as in our pipeline right now, a lot are local government projects, and most of those are very relevant to climate-related considerations are local government projects as well. I have examples of them later. There's another initiative we did. This is called the generic preferred risk allocation. So we've put together a template of risks that we think are relevant in PPPs in the various stages during construction, finance-related operations, maintenance. Identified who can best manage that and how they should be structured or articulated in the contract. Identified the party or parties that can best handle the risks involved in undertaking a PPP, including some proposed mitigating strategies and contractual provisions, so that the practice from one project can be replicated in the other and learned from that translation. Of course, there's a need to customize it per sectors. There are the risks per sector can be different. This is a guide for implementing agencies in the structuring of PPP projects. Of course, as I said, subject to sector-specific requirements and viability considerations. But that has significantly helped our project development people in looking at very important, very risks that both parties should consider in their PPP projects. We also put together a template on parameters, terms, and conditions, or PTCs. This to provide transparency on the PTCs that government can enter into in PPPs. So what are this? And this, of course, is drawn from previous projects, previous approved projects, to ensure that negotiation and subsequent drafting of PPP contracts are done expeditiously. This is really to facilitate things and get them moving faster, and to serve as a reference tool to help contract drafters and reviewers, all capitalizing on what we've done in the previous projects and then making them available as a knowledge, as a tool for replication, expansion, as basis for the subsequent projects which we will be doing. What actions are we taking to address climate change? We have put together a rather comprehensive approach to climate change and PPPs. We're grateful to have been granted support from ADB. We have this ADB and funding support from Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund. This is something we facilitated to us or afforded to us through a technical assistance grant to the Philippine PPP Center. And the nature of the grant would be capacity building, development and procurement of local climate and disaster resilient PPPs. So what we did is to collaborate with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, the agency mandated to oversee, regulate natural resources, and Department of Environment, and selected local governments. So what we'll do is, and what we're doing already, and in fact we're almost done on this one, is to prepare risk resiliency program and investment portfolios for risk resilient PPPs in selected provinces and cities. And of course, these are the cities or local governments that are where climate change resiliency is a major consideration. The IPPRs, or investment portfolio for risk resilience, will consist of PPP projects in emerging climate change and resilient sectors. And these are water and sanitation, solid waste management, renewable energy, health drainage, and health, drainage and flood control, green vertical infrastructure, etc. And these projects identified from this more holistic look at the sector will be further developed by the center into actual PPP projects. Quick detail of this one, just to illustrate how coordinated we're doing this with the key agencies and local governments. We divided them to team 1 and 2. They will first formulate resilience roadmaps and IPPRs for the selected cities. So it's really looking at the details of what are the considerations in terms of resilience, climate change in these regions, and incorporating them into the requirements of the projects of these local government units. So, and then of course we'll put that together, and the center will provide advice on resiliency measures, climate change, vulnerability assessment, land use and development planning, GIS to the selected projects. And then they form part of our pipeline. And then our interventions, capacity building, technical assistance, transactional advisory will come in so that this will eventually translate into our pipeline as real projects that we can eventually bid out to prospective private partners. Some examples of them, these are ADB UCC RTF support for resilient PPPs. As I said, we're doing a tourism enterprise zone. This is a TIESA. TIESA is Tourism Infrastructure and Economic Zone Authorities. It's under the Department of Tourism. This will involve operation and management of a property for tourism, ensure as well considerations for resiliency. And this is a joint venture, 206 billion worth of project, and this is under procurement. I don't have the exact date. Interested audience here, you can go to our website. There will be specific announcement on the dates of this procurement. Iloilo City Slaughterhouse. Iloilo is a fast rising province in the Visayas. Design, rehabilitation, operation and maintenance of a slaughterhouse. Again, in Iloilo City, central terminal public markets. These are mostly BOT types of project we're structuring. We're doing the feasibility study and structuring work at the PPP Center. Again, the details of their actual invitation to bid will be posted in our website soon. Ormoc cities. Ormoc is another fastly expanding city in the Visayas. Comprehensive water supply system. Again, 36 billion pesos is the estimated project cost. Baslig City bulk water supply, another local government water supply project, and San Pablo septage management project, septage treatment facility in San Pablo City. Solid waste, there's a big solid waste management facility or project. It's an unsolicited proposal to Quezon City. Quezon City is one of the big cities in Metro Manila. Construction and operation and maintenance of waste to energy facility. Around 22 billion is estimated cost. This is under development. General Santos City is another big city down in Mindanao. It's a sanitary landfill as well. So all of this really very what's the word? The project will need real inputs on climate and disaster and climate related, resiliency related inputs. So very good showcase from this risk resiliency program portfolios we're developing, which we hope to other cities, other LGUs, not just probably in the Philippines, but in the region, Southeast Asia, can replicate. Of course, we'll translate all of this into some knowledge product later that we can make available to our clients. There's another one. These are big ones in Metro Manila. Rizal Park Western Section Development, management and operation with a 3-story green building and esplanade. There's a property development. This is a building that needs to be rehabilitated within Makati City, also owned by NEDA. Property development type of project. And there's a agro-industrial information and technology park in one of the biggest universities in Los Baños, University of the Philippines. It's going to be a research and a property development type of technological park in this part of Laguna. Laguna is a province of, near Manila. State universities in the Philippines are also contracting entities. They can enter into PPPs as well. What else? Sorry. Pipeline, just a snapshot. We actually have a pipeline of 59 projects. This is the estimated cost, and these are mostly national and local projects. Again, the details of them are in our website. We are very much online, and as we move with actual project development and updates and milestones, market sounding, invitation to bid, these are all posted in our website. What are these types of projects at the national level? These are still the same infrastructure requirements we need: transportation, hospital facilities, vertical infrastructure, IT systems. But note that the local governments are the same projects we're helping. Very real climate-related considerations: water supply and sanitation, solid waste management, etc. Some of these projects I mentioned, just examples: the University of the Philippines General Hospital project, the North-South Commuter Rail, and the Tarlac-Mangasinan Expressway Extension project. Okay, ways forward. Sorry, that's a lengthy. But again, the details of this project can be found in our website. But how do we move forward? And this is something we would like to share to our counterparts in the region, even abroad. We need to continue the efforts to concretize climate and resiliency components and requirements. Most of it still seem abstract and difficult to pin down into actual bite-sized items that we can translate into project design, risk structuring, procurement specs in our invitation to bid and in terms of reference. So construction metrics. So we need to continue the effort to concretize them into something we can truly use, truly translate into this important project decisions or actions: design, financing, risk structures, review and approvals, procurement, construction, operation, maintenance, and expansion. These are the very important phases of our project decisions in PPPs. And it's always a challenge to concretize, pin down into specific words and items this resiliency components and requirements. Focused, customized, and sustainable capacity development. Continued learning, continued generation of knowledge, not just from our own experience, but from the rest of the world. Focused because we need to look at sector specific requirements. Customized because it needs to be framed according to the agency or body that will need that. For example, our contracting entities, they need it at the project development stage for feasibility study, contract drafting. At the policy making bodies or the approving agencies, they need to look at it from the perspective of fiscal space, contingent liabilities, etc., etc. So this very detailed, customized, I think the keyword is customized capacity development for all agencies concerned. Third, provision of accessible resources, technical assistance, grants for project development and structuring, viability of financing or similar support mechanisms, transaction advisory, monitoring and evaluation. The PPP Center has put together a PDMF, Project Development and Monitoring Facility, as early as 2011. And most of the projects that have been awarded were supported by this PDMF. So this PDMF, put together by ADB, partly from our Philippine government budget, and Australia, has enabled us to hire transaction advisors from the best firms in the world. So they come here and really help us do project development, do transaction advisory. And if we don't have these resources, this agency, especially the smaller agencies who are starting to just understand and build a PPP pipeline, will really have a difficult time. If these resources, expertise are available and are made accessible to them, this will really a big boost or a big help into this new sector that we're trying to this new element, disaster, climate change resilience, into our project structuring and transaction advisory work. In the Philippines, for example, we have national consultant for specific sectors, and they have very detailed terms of reference on what they can do, what they should do in translating these components or elements into the project at key stages of development, approvals, review, procurement. Deeper engagement with the private sector in critical climate action policy and program development and reforms. They shouldn't be just recipients of bids or invitation to bids or challenge requirements. At the development stage of policy, they should be engaged. They should be part of the policy and planning and programming requirements. Because at the end, they will be the ones who will decide if they will participate or bid, or is this project realistic or something they can do with government. So I don't know how it is in other countries, but in the Philippines, we have mechanisms for private sector to participate in policy making at the executive branch. And we've employed that in the policy circulars that I mentioned earlier. They are actually represented in the policy governing board. PPP governing board is a private sector representative there who comes in and provide inputs from the private sector and sees if these policies and requirements are realistic or responsive to their requirement, their capacity, etc. Dialogue, sharing, and replication of practices and innovations among PPP bodies or agencies in the region. And I am very pleased that we have had the opportunity for this session. And of course, as mentioned earlier, we have several opportunities in the region enabled or facilitated by ADB, UNESCO to share our lessons, our innovations in the region with our neighbors. And I have seen some of them in this 5-day conference within specific sectors and particularly in reference to project development and financing. So a lot remains to be done, but I think we are in the right direction in putting together, concretizing, developing concrete initiatives towards climate-related inputs, requirements to our PPPs. As I was saying earlier with Saeed when I had a chance to say hi to him, the Philippines is at the interesting stage. We have a new president. There's a new administration coming in. We're happy about his what's the word? PPP bias. He said we'll continue with the role of the private sector and we'll have more PPPs. And again, would like to pursue the same initiatives we have already put together relative to climate and resiliency considerations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ricoto, for this excellent presentation. It's good to hear that the PPP Center is taking climate change seriously through capacity building, technical assistance, the various programs that you mentioned and are being put in place. So hopefully that will indeed result in a healthy pipeline of climate resilient PPP projects.
And would like to share that initiative with our neighbors in the region. I think we share the same resilience, climate change considerations, Indonesia, Malaysia, and there's a lot we can learn from each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's a few questions in the Q&A. I'm not sure, Mr. Ricoto, how you want to address those. Do you want to just go one by one?
Yes.
All right.
There's one here from Jean. Thanks for sharing. Please use the tab. Sorry, I can go to the...
Yeah, the Q&A, right.
Sorry, can you help me with that? I can't find it now. I think I'm...
Sure. Okay. Let me just... All right, I'll just put one question from myself, actually, first. In fact, it's because I'm quite involved in social infrastructure, and I know there's a few. You showed one as well, one or two. But I was wondering if there's a stronger pipeline coming up in the future.
Yeah, there's been a move towards the social infrastructure sector, as we have, in a way, been doing a lot already over the past few years on the traditional infrastructure, rail and roads. And there are some projects we can use as example. For example, we have school building PPPs. We're doing hospital modernization and expansion as PPPs. We have IT systems done as PPPs. And again, these are, as earlier mentioned, initiated by local governments. The full devolution, the devolution to them of the mandate to do projects has enabled local governments to look at non-traditional projects and make them viable for PPPs as well. There's of course a challenge living of viability, and that's the need to look at bundling mechanisms and other, scaling up type of inputs.
Exactly, and in fact, often with social infrastructure, you might want to look at capturing the wider economic value that you are creating. Because on its own, maybe a hospital might not, or a school might not be, let's say, commercially viable, but the real estate that is being developed around it will surely increase in value. So these are the type of things that indeed...
Yes. There's another question, if I can just proceed, Levin.
Absolutely.
Tenena, thank you for your question. What are the mechanisms, key success factors to foster local projects? In our economic landscape, national projects are the priority. Even if the local projects seem interesting, the chance to have a validation of central government is less. Yes, that's very real as well here, Tenina. Initially, of course, local governments invoke their autonomy. I think what's unique in the Philippines is that our local governments are autonomous, and they really are. They strongly invoke that autonomy that they have. What we did was over the last five is to do a focused local PPP program. We trained local governments, provided templates. I myself, I'm a trainer for PP. We did a manual for local PPPs and developed some template contracts guidelines that they can use. And true enough, several local governments proceeded to do their own PPPs. With the recent development of the Mandanas and EO1 rate, as I presented earlier, they're more equipped this time as they will now have more resources to do feasibility studies, probably do their counterpart financing. That's what we're trying to do. National government, of course, will have roles still in big projects, but that's something we're trying to delineate. The EO1 to 8 rule requires a devolution transition plan, which says national agencies should define which can now be retained to them, or which can now be fully delegated to local governments. It's a challenge because there's a lot of local governments in the Philippines. The PPP Center is a small agency who might be overwhelmed with the request for inputs, training, capacity building, but we're very excited about that.
Excellent.
Another one from Rona. Do you have a review fee in your unsolicited proposal guidelines? No. If so, what happens if the public sector decides not to proceed with the project? Does the private party get reimbursed or something? Our unsolicited proposal is a pure private sector initiative. The government can say no, or of course, when it accepts it, it's granted the original proponent status. Can the government agency change its mind? Yes, it can. Will the private party who submitted the study be compensated? There's no specific rule for that in our law, but um, in the end, if the project is tweaked to a solicited type, the original proponent will have still the ability to participate in it. But most of the projects I've seen as solicited, they as unsolicited, they proceeded to go on with the challenge process.
So, Mr. Ricoto, actually, the tab next to it, there you can see it says Q&A.
Yeah.
There's a few more. In fact, one that you just talked about now is unsolicited proposals, right? If
Yes.
I'm not mistaken, we have Andrew who also asked a question about unsolicited proposals.
Yes, please. Andrew, can you say what proportion of sexual projects come from unsolicited proposals? How many times has the Swiss challenge resulted in different proponent? The last 10 years before now, there was very little unsolicited proposals. We're encouraging solicited proposals. That's why we had this facility, project development facility, to allow or to help agencies put together feasibility studies and therefore proceed as solicited. But of course, the law requires or allows unsolicited. We have over the last 5 years around five big unsolicited projects. If I'm not mistaken, two or three of them went on to award. How many times has a Swiss challenge? Andrew, the three I mentioned, there were no challengers. So it eventually went to the original proponent. Yeah. So in fact, one of the major proposed amendment we're going to have for the PPP law when we have it is to really expand the period for challenge process. As we've seen from our experience, the provision in the law for a challenger to come up with a better bid is really limited. So that's something we're looking at to facilitate more challengers and eventually get the challenger to win the project. But as it is, we have a few around, I think out of 10, 3 or 4 as unsolicited, and most of them, as I said, went to the original proponent.
Great. Not sure if you can see all the questions, but we have another one here from
Dimson,
Dimson.
yes.
Yes.
Private sector has no control and risk associated with political, legal, and regulatory aspect. Any protection that can cover them. As I said in that GPRAM, generic preferred risk allocation matrix that we have, yeah, si Dimson is is a Filipino. Yes, Dimson, there's no real provision in our law that can cover that. It can't be insured as well, no? But in the generic preferred risk allocation matrix, that is care of government. I'm sure you've read the recent IRR, the amended IRR, where there are more specific provisions on how this political and regulatory aspects will be captured in these PPP agreements. Hopefully, DIMSON will have the PPP Act and will have more details. Will have more detailed provisions on how this risks can be spelled out in PPPs.
Great. Another question from Andrew.
At one stage, the Philippines was progressing 4 airports from Manila. Where do each of this now stand? And surely only 2 are needed. What I know is that one proceeded to be awarded as an unsolicited proposal. We have to get the recent decision of the Department of Transportation on what will happen to the other airports. But you're right, there should be some detailed decision or policy on where they should stand and which are needed, and we should complement each other and not compete with each other. As I said, the one I know of is that in Bulacan has already been awarded, and there's one in Clark, and the one in Manila is still here.
Right.
Okay. Again, this Andrew, this is all of this have to be presented anew to the incoming administration, and see how they will look at it if you're gonna proceed as earlier planned.
So we have 4 more minutes. I don't know. I had another question. Let me check if there's any others.
Here, I can see it, Levin. How has the government dealt with the COVID-19 impact? Has it mainly been through force majeure or other mechanisms been applied? Yes, mainly it is. And I think this is because we didn't foresee it. It's not something we've articulated in our contracts. But we've learned our lesson, I think, in the subsequent contracts. We will now have provision for this type of risks. Yeah.
Excellent. I don't see any other questions. Yeah, we're about 3 minutes or so left. So let's maybe give it another second. All right.
So I think just while we have a minute, there's a common question asked of me by international audience that I usually speak to. Are the PPP Center services for free, or do you get paid for that? We are like a government consulting arm, so we are a government agency. So our support to implementing agencies, both local and national, so that's capacity building, technical assistance, transaction advisory, are free because we are government. But there are assistance like project development, transaction advisor, where we use the project development facility. There's a fund that we have to use, and this is where we hire transaction advisors. We have put together a panel of firms, and this is a revolving fund. So the winning bidder will eventually pay for the cost of that work. And several projects, as I said, that have been awarded were made or facilitated or enabled by this project development facility.
Excellent. All right. I guess we're towards the end of the session. Let me just first thank Mr. Riccotto for this really good presentation, for answering so candidly answering all the questions. I also would like to thank all the participants that have stayed with us throughout the presentation. In case you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us via the WAPPP website, or I don't know if Mr. Riccotto, you're able to hang around a little bit more. People can, I guess, message you directly, or perhaps find you at the launch of the Congress now, right?
Yes. Yeah, I will be. I'll be getting into some of the sessions. So I want to hear the other speakers. Thank you, Levin. Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I hope to see you in the next session. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you.